Okay, Rabosai. We begin now the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph. And we're going to learn about the details of Zolel V'Sove, which is the Machayev of an Achila that makes him into a Ben Sor. Me'emasai Chayev. At what point does the Ben Sor Umora become Chayev Skua? And the Mishnah answers, Mishiyochal Tartimar Basar. Again, Tartimar is a vast volume of, in this case, Basar. The Gemara is going to try to understand how great is this volume called Tartimar. And V'yishteh Chatzi Lo Yain Haitalki. Apparently, the Italian wine, and that's true even today to some extent, is the best wine in the business. And what happens is that because this young lad who's just become a gadol, and in that period of time of 3 months between the Shtei Saras and what's called Hikif Hazakon, so during that short period of time, he did something that's what's called gorer or moshech. In other words, a kind of addiction. You know, when you get used to a certain kind of very special wine, yayin mishubach, shehu me'ula, it's a superior quality wine, then it's gorer. Gorer means it entices him, it drags him to more and more. And the same is true when he eats this massive amount of basar. He gets so used to basar that it's moshech. And that's called nimshach acharov. Nimshach acharov. That's going to be the phrase that's going to show up here over and over again throughout the study of Ben Sora Umora. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell a little story because I think that story sort of gives us a little hint as to what's going on. This is a story about a grizzly bear. If you've ever been to the West, like, for example, the west part of Canada, so everything is about the grizzly bear. It's like an obsession over there. So we were in what's called the Canadian Rockies, me and my wife and my 2 girls. At that time, they were still single. And we're looking all over for the grizzly bear and so forth and so on. But anyway, at one point, there was a female ranger. Like, you know, she was in the whole uniform, you know, that khaki outfit. And she showed us a grizzly bear, meaning the skin of a grizzly bear spread out. It was quite scary, you know, because it was the real thing. And she told us the following story. I'll never forget it. This grizzly bear was killed by the Rangers. They had to murder him, which is never the case. Why? What happened? You know, people go camping out in that area. And in this particular case, they had a barbecue and they left meat in the barbecue, and they went to sleep for the night. A grizzly bear who survives on berries. Grizzly bears eat berries. If I'm not mistaken, they eat thousands and thousands of bushels worth of berries on a daily basis. But this particular grizzly bear smelled the meat of that barbecue, and he ate the meat. Now, a grizzly bear is a very dangerous animal if you get it angry. In fact, they used to tell us that if you see a grizzly bear, then you should be singing, you know, like, so that he doesn't think that you're a threat in any way. This grizzly bear starts coming back night after night to the same place where the caravans, set up shop at night. And every time the rangers would take him further and further away. They would take the grizzly bear, I guess, in a truck or whatever they had, and they brought him kilometers away from this site. And every time, no matter where they dropped him, he came back to this kilometer. They took him, you won't believe this, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away. And he kept coming back, and he's a threat to human beings. And at the end, they had no choice but to kill the grizzly bear. So I accepted this as a true story. I don't think she was joking with us or dramatizing it. And to me and my wife, it was like a mussar schmooze. The grizzly bear could have been very satisfied with berries, but he had tasted something better than berries, and he got addicted to it. And he kept going back no matter how far in order to enjoy the meat. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Mone Basar, V'lo Yayin. Apparently, Mone is a greater amount than Tartimar. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi is Mekil, and he says, no. He's not a Ben Sora Morer because he ate Tartimar, even though that's a massive amount of meat. He's got to eat a Mana. Now, I'll just tell you that a Mana is 100 dinrim. And a dinar is kesef. So 100 dinrim, I guess, is a real heavy volume that's used here by Rabbi Yossi to explain how much basar he's got to eat until he's finally addicted. And we're afraid he'll kill people. And a lo yayin is twice a chatzi lo yayin. I'm going to assume that even Rabbi Yossi is talking about yayin hitalki. He doesn't mention it. The Mishnah continues, Achal b'chavuras mitzvah. These are the cases in which he's not qualified as a ben sora umora, even though he ate that amount of meat and he drank that volume of wine. Why? Because he was eating in a chabura of, I guess, what we would call a sudas mitzvah. So could you imagine? I mean, it's like hard to believe. This young lad stole meat and yayin, and he's eating in a sudas mitzvah. Very strange how this happened exactly. Or he stole money and he bought meat. Another case. Achal, he ate basar, drank wine. Be'ibur achodesh, when the members of the Bezdin would decide that this month should be a 30-day month rather than a 29-day month, they created a whole banquet to publicize that this month is going to be a 30-day month, what's called a Chodesh Me'ubar. So this lad who stole from his father and bought basar and yayin is eating this at a sudas ibur achodesh. Another case. Achal masasheni b'Yushalayim, on years 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the Shemitah cycle, we are obligated, in addition to Masa Rishon, to be mafresh Masa Sheni. The Masa Sheni, which is 10% of his produce, has to be brought to Yerushalayim and eaten in Yerushalayim, b'kedusha b'tara, and he steals money, which is called Masa Sheni money. Now, what's Masa Sheni money? This is money after pidyon. The Torah says that if it's too difficult and cumbersome to bring to Yerushalayim 1/10 of your produce, then you do what's called a pidyon mos Masa Sheni. We've discussed it many times. And he, the Ben Sorer, stole the money that was designated as Masa Sheni money, and he bought basar v'yayin. Another case. You and I would have said that Adarabba, that only proves that he's lower, more of an oisvarf, of a Russia, right? So in other words, he steals money and then he buys nevelos, treifos, shkatzim, v'ramasim. Now here there's a girsa problem. So for the time being, until I know otherwise, I'm going to skip that which is in parentheses. And we go on. Achal davar shehu mitzvah. Now it's very interesting because we've already mentioned Maser Sheni. Maser Sheni is a mitzvah. So I'm not sure why the Mishnah feels compelled to tell us A, Dvar Mitzvah, and B, Maser Sheni. Maser Sheni is a classic case of a Dvar Mitzvah. V, Dvar Avera. And once again, the same question I want to ask. You just gave me a list of Achilas Avera, of Nevelos, Treifos, Shkatzim, V'matzim. And now you give me a klal, Davar Shu Avera. I mean, if you had given me this klal, Davar Shu Avera, it would seem to be completely unnecessary and superfluous to specify the Dvar Avera of Nevelos and Treifos. Achal kol machal, v'lo achal basar. If he ate every single food under the earth with the stolen money, and he stuffed himself gluttonously, but he didn't eat meat, shasa kol mashke, or he drank all the liquids, the beverages in the world. There wasn't a single beer that he didn't drink. How many different kinds of beer are there? I mean, if you talk about companies, I myself could probably name 20. I don't know. I don't drink beer because I can't stand beer. But lo shasayai, he never drank wine with the stolen money. In all these cases, eino nase ben sorer umora. In other words, he's got to not only steal the money, buy meat and eat the meat, buy yayin and drink the yayin, but on top of that, it's got to be an achila hamuteres, but not an achila of mitzvah. So we have three categories of achila. You have an achila of avera, like shkatzim ramasim. You have achilas mitzvah, like ma'aser sheni. And in the middle, you have a parva achila. It's neither avera, it's kosher meat. It's neither a mitzvah, it's not ma'aser sheni. And that's what he ate in voluminous volumes with the stolen money that he took from his father. Then he's a ben sorah more. But if he took the stolen money and he either ate with the bas and yayin a mitzvah, sudas mitzvah, or ma'aser sheni, or alternatively, he ate a sudas avera of shkatzim v'ramasim, in all those cases, he's patur and he's not going to be put to death. Shneimar, zolel v'sove. Well, what does that prove? That the guy is gluttonous. Well, afal pisha ein raya l'davar, zecher l'davar. Truth is, the Mishnah concedes that I can't prove my point, and the p'tur in all those cases from zolel v'sove, but I do have what we call a zecher l'davar, a little bit of a. Now, again, what exactly zecher l'davar means? Let's assume it means a raya, a proof, evidence, but it's not 100% ironclad. Al tehi besove yayin bezolele basar loma. A pasuk in Mishlei, Shlomo Melech warns us not to be sove yayin or zole basar. So even though the Torah uses the terminology zolel v'sove, and it doesn't specify basar and yayin, and it certainly doesn't specify that it's a davar shel heter, but not a mitzvah and not an avera, but nevertheless we see that the word zolel refers to basar and sove refers to yayin from this pasuk in Mishlei. And therefore we're going to assume that dafka these are moshech. We said that the achila and the shasiya of the ben sarmara is addictive, and basar and yayin is addictive. That's why Shlomo Melch warns us: don't overdo it with wine or with eating meat, because you're going to get, like that grizzly bear, you're going to get addicted to it. Excuse me for a second. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do is choose part of this Mishnah and focus on part of this Mishnah. So we're going to do this in various stages. I'm not going to be bound necessarily by the sequence of the Mishnah and the sequence of the Gemara, but I want to start with the sugya of Meiser Sheni. So what I'd like you to do here is fast forward to Daf Ayin Amud Beis, where the Gemara takes up the sugya of Meiser Sheni. This is, if you count from the bottom of Ayin Amud Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines up from Daf Ayin Amud Beis, Achal Meiser Sheni b'Yushalayim. So the Gemara wants to know, why is it that if the Ben Sorah steals money that's Meiser Sheni from his father, and he eats meat which he buys with the most Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim, or drinks wine, he's not chayav as a Ben Sorah. And the Gemara gives the strange answer, which I think might, in a sense, shed a light on everything in the Mishnah. Lo mimshach. Now the words ki arche mean this is the derech, this is what you do. Meaning, if you have most Meiser Sheni, again, he had no right to steal it from his father, but what he's holding on to is most Meiser Sheni. What do you do with most Meiser Sheni? What's the derech? What's the regilus? What can he anticipate? We anticipate you do with Meiser Sheni. And the answer is that you buy meat and wine. That's what they used to do with Meiser Sheni. They took it to Yerushalayim, and there they bought meat and wine. And they ate meat and they ate wine. Is therefore lo mimshach. Remember, we said that the entire parsha of Zol v'Soveh, that's Mechayev the Ben Sorah, is all about mimshach. Mimshach means it's moshech. It allures him, it pulls him, it creates a pull. It's otherwise known as nigrar. Nigrar means he's pulled by this achila. But if the achila is urche, it's the derech, then it's not moshech. So let's just take a quick look at Rashi. Rashi adds another element into this equation. So we'll start with Rashi counting up from the bottom of Daf Ayin Amud Beis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines up. I'm sorry, I went too far. No, I didn't go far enough, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines up from the bottom. Achal Meiser Sheni. Ganav mimos Meiser Sheni. V'kana basar v'yayin v'ochal. Te'i ganav basar v'yayin atzmo afilu dechulin namilo. Okay, so Rashi refers to another part of the sugya, that if he stole meat or wine, he's not chayav as a ben sarah mor. Right? He's got to buy the basar, he's got to buy the yayin, and even at a cheap price, and it's with the money that he stole from his farm. Fine. So he stole money of Masechet, and he buys meat and wine, and he drinks and eats the meat and the wine. Dichi urche, kiderch mitzvasa. Do you notice that Rashi adds a word to the Gemara that we don't have? Which word does he have? Or does he interpret? Mitzvasa. It's not just that, like I said before, what do you do with Mos Masechet? What do you do with them? You go buy meat and drink wine. But Rashi introduces another element here, kiderech mitzvasa, that he's doing the derech of the mitzvah. And how do we know that this is a mitzvah? Shenemar, here it says nemar, but it should be shenemar. Bebokar ubitzon ubiyayin ubishechar b'masechet. In the parsha Masechet, the Torah mentions meat and wine. Now, exactly what shechar means, shechar is a type of wine. And the Torah commands you to go up to Yerushalayim and buy with Mos Masechet, bakar vitzon, yayin, and shechar. That is the mitzvah. So the words ki urche now, according to Rashi, means ki mitzvah. So now I want to learn with you. Again, I think John is with me on this, but I think we'll be able to do it even without the actual Gemara. It's only a few lines. The Masechet writes, this is He'orina b'chaf dalid, l'chor yesh lahakshos. Why does the Gemara need urche to explain why the Ben Soromor is not chayev when he steals Masechet and eats, etc.? Madua Gemara lo bira, I would add the word b'pashtus, shaptur shel Ben Soromor b'achilas Masechet mishum shezu achila shel mitzvah. What is this fancy language here of chi'urche? It's an achila shel mitzvah. The Mishnah says explicitly that in the case of achila shel mitzvah, the Ben Soromor is potter. Ochal dvar shu mitzvah, etc., potter. So he quotes the Tiferes Yisrael, one of the super commentaries on Mishnayos. Sha'amnam, it's true, achilas Masechet hi mitzvah, aval eina chova al habaylim la'ochlo. This is a big chiddush. I always thought the mitzvah is to go to Yerushalayim, buy meat and wine and eat it. And the achila is the achila shel mitzvah. No. I don't have to eat it. Let somebody else eat it. All I have to do is take it up to Yerushalayim. Either I take up the original tfuah to Yerushalayim, or I'm podeh chutz Yerushalayim and take up the mos, and the mos are used to buy meat and wine. But that's where the mitzvah ends. It doesn't include a chova liochlo. Again, he writes, "Aval ein chova labayim liochlo. Elazu mitzvah shamaiser ye ochel b'Yushalayim. It should be eaten b'Yushalayim. Avila yidei acherim. Anybody can eat it." See, I don't understand one thing about the Tiferes Yisrael. The fact that anyone can eat it, therefore it's not an achila shel mitzvah. Whoever eats it gets that mitzvah. If he himself eats it, in this case the Ben Soromor, then that's a mitzvah. I don't know why he admits, he says, "Meiser ye achel b'Yushalayim." There's a mitzvah that the mice should be eaten in Yerushalayim, but anyone can fulfill that mitzvah. Okay, so anyone can fulfill that mitzvah. Therefore, it's not an achila shel mitzvah. The Masechet is going to elaborate on this, but I would like to explain it the way I understand it, and you're the jury. You decide if you think I'm right. Let me give what we call in Yiddish a Beispiel. I'm going to give you an example and then come back to this Tiferes Yisrael about Meiser Sheni. In a Korban Pesach, there are two dinim. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is of the opinion that Eina Pesach Nechal Elad Chatzos. I have to eat the Pesach by midnight on the night of the 15th of Nisan. But there's another mitzvah to eat the Korban Pesach up to the next morning. How do I reconcile these two? On the one hand, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah demands that we eat it before Chatzos. On the other hand, we have to eat the Korban Pesach up till the next morning. That's a contradiction. So the Beis HaLevi, Rabbi Yosef ben Brisker, is famous for saying that there are two categories of mitzvahs with regard to Achila. One he calls a Chovas Gavra, that I have to eat whatever I have to eat, in this case, Korban Pesach. And in order to fulfill a Chovas Gavra, I need to eat only a Kizayis. And once I eat a Kizayis, I fulfill that Chiyuv. But what happens if after I eat the Kizayis, there's still basar of the Korban Pesach that hasn't been eaten yet? That mitzvah is a Chovas Chefta. It's not on the Gavra, but it means that the Pesach has to be eaten. It's got to be a nechal. It's got to be completely consumed. Otherwise, it becomes nosar, which is also Misa Kares with daybreak. So after Chatzos, says the Beis HaLevi, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we go through a transition. How you say transition as a verb? We transit? No. Anyway, we move from a Chovas Gavra. You've already fulfilled your Chovas Gavra, Yeda Kazayas, and that you have to eat by Chatzos. Your Chovas Gavra terminates, but now you have a Chefta of Basar, which is a Chalus Shem Kodesh of Pesach, that has to be eaten. It's got to be a Nechal. And that continues past Chatzos up until the morning. So you're not fulfilling a Chovas Gavra after Chatzos. You're fulfilling a Chovas Chefta that's inherent in the Basar of the Pesach, that it has to be eaten. Why am I saying this? I want to ask the following question. There's a mitzvah to eat Maser Sheni in Yerushalayim, Basar and Yain, which you purchased with Mos of Maser Sheni. Is that a Chovas Gavra or is it Chovas Chefta? The nafkamina is going to be whether or not I can pass it on to someone else. If it's a Chovas Gavra, your Achila is not going to allow me vicariously to fulfill my Chovas Gavra. I have to eat it myself. It's a Masechet begufo, and the Achila must be, like, for example, if we go back to the model of Korban Pesach, up to Chatzos, I have to eat a Kizayas. It's not enough that you ate a Kizayas and he ate a Kizayas and all the Bnei Chabura ate. I have to eat myself. That's a Chovas Gavra in Achila. And if we apply that to my Sasheni, it means that if these are my mos, I am the one who not only purchases yayin and basa, but I have to eat the yayin and the basa. And the achila is a fulfillment of the Chovas Gavra. Comes along the Tiferes Yisrael, and he says, no. There ain't no Chovas Gavra with regard to the yayin and the basa. Your Chovas Gavra terminates when you brought the mos to Yerushalayim and purchased basar and yain. Beyond that, there's only what's called a chovas chefta. And the definition of achila shel mitzvah, which in our context patters the Ben Soromor from Skila, is a chovas gavra, a mitzvah achila. This is not a mitzvah achila. This is a din in the Kodesh, that the Kedushas Maser Sheni, which was transferred to the Mos, and from the Mos over to the Yayin and to the Basar, that Kedusha requires a Nechal, that the Maser Sheni be eaten. Not by me, by anybody. Did you follow my analogy to Korban Pesach? I'll be the Beis HaLevi. I hope you did. Now comes along the Tiferes Yisrael, and he says the following. So what is the chiddush of our Mishnah? The Mishnah has already told me that an Achila shel mitzvah poteres, and in such a case, the Ben Soromor is exempt. So why did I have to mention Ma'aser Sheni? Shekevan shu noig b'Ma'aser Sheni k'moshe derech linog bo. Since Ma'aser Sheni has that additional element of being a nechal, and that's what we do with the most of Ma'aser Sheni. And we took the most of Ma'aser Sheni, we purchased basar and yayin, and now the derech, the urche, is nechal. That makes it into an achila shel mitzvah. He calls it a srach mitzvah. I think what he means by a srach mitzvah is a kiyuv in the chefta. So the chefta generates a chiyuv to be eaten. It's like the Ma'aser Sheni basar or yayin is crying out, "Eat me!" I have to be eaten because that's the mitzvah in the chefta machmas kedushas Ma'aser Sheni. But when you go ahead and you eat it, that's called a srach mitzvah. So the Ma'aser Achila, although it's not a kiyuv of chovas gavra, but rather a kiyuv of chovas chefta, it still is elevated up to the status of a mitzvah. V'lachein eino nase ben sora umor. Now, the Masechet quotes another shita. It's called Tal Torah. Right now, I don't have the ability, although probably somewhere in this beautiful base, I could look it up. Who authored the Tal Torah? He says that since the son stole most of Ma'aser Sheni, he never actually acquired ownership of those most. And therefore, when he goes ahead and he purchases with those most, basar and yayin, the whole purchase is invalid. And therefore, the Kedushas Ma'aser Sheni, of course, is not transferred over to the basar and the yayin. So the Gemara says, if the Ben Soromor, after stealing this most Ma'aser Sheni, eats the basar and yayin which he purchases with these most, why is he potter? What logical reason should there be to justify why he's potter? The yayin and the basar did not acquire the sanctity of Ma'aser Sheni. The Tirza Gemara, the Kevan shu nog b'derech shenog b'Ma'aser Sheni. Unbelievable. What do you usually do with Ma'aser Sheni? You're the valid, rightful owner of the most Ma'aser Sheni. You use them to buy meat and wine, and you eat meat and drink wine. That's exactly what he's doing. He, the Ben Soromor, after stealing the most Ma'aser Sheni, is behaving as if it was rightfully his, legally his, and he's imitating exactly what you do with most Ma'aser Sheni. You purchase meat and wine, and you eat the meat and drink the wine. That's exactly what he's doing. Again, this is not really an achilas mitzvah because there's no sanctity of Ma'aser Sheni in the basar and yayin that he purchased with stolen money. So you can't talk about an achila shel mitzvah. And if you can't talk about an achila shel mitzvah, why in the heavens tarnation is he potter when he eats the meat and drinks the wine and he's not chayav as a Ben Soromor? And the answer is because of orche. Orche means because he imitated what normally would be done when the rightful owner of the most Ma'aser Sheni purchased meat in Yerushalayim and wine, and he ate the meat and drank the wine. That's exactly what he's puppeting, what he is imitating. So when the Ben Soromor imitates what the rightful owner of the most Ma'aser Sheni does, and he goes through the exact same stages, which if you saw it on a video camera be exact, he takes the most Masechet, goes into a store, he buys some meat, he buys some wine, sits down, eats the meat, eats the wine. That's exactly what any Bailam would do with most Masechet. He's imitating and duplicating Masechet. Therefore, we don't kill him. Why? And he says, Lo yimshach achar achila kazos. Again, I'm sure there's a lot to be said here, and we want to go deeper and deeper, but on a psychological level, we're saying that, like, Ke'ilu, he fools himself into thinking that I'm a great guy, like the person who, steals money and he buys food to meat and wine to eat at a Sudas mitzvah. And as soon as Ibra Chodim. So I don't know, somehow psychologically, that Achila, which is, I wouldn't even call it a Sudas mitzvah, it's a Sudas Agazlan, but it doesn't have that impact on him because he in his mind has fooled himself into the psychological state of mind that he's Ki'ilu, a pious person, he's doing a mitzvah. Here too, he's imitating what his father would have done had he brought his most Masechet to Yerushalayim. He thinks he's doing a mitzvah. I'm a great guy. And it's not going to have that impact to make him addicted to the meat and the wine. But I'm sure, again, it's much more profound than that. Okay. Now, at this point, after seeing Rashi, that Rashi says that he stole most Masechet and he bought basar and yayin and he ate it. And Rashi says, Kiderech mitzvah, so shenemar bebokar ubitzon ubiyayin ubishecher b'Masechet. Let's compare Rashi to the Rambam. Okay, then? So you'll see here on the side, he tells you to look in the Rambam, Perek Zayin Mehilchas Mamrim Halacha Beis. So I'm going to take a minute to bring it over from the shelf because it's always good to see it inside. Mamish at the end of Hilchas Mamre, last chapter, 7 chapters of Hilchas Mamre. Achila zu shuchayev oleha dvarim harbe yesh bahem, meaning there are many conditions that have to be met in order for this achil to qualify as an achila machayeves skila. Vehein kulam, and all these conditions, halacha mipi kabbalah. In other words, we have this in tradition. Again, we saw in the Mishnah Zeichel Adavar, but it's really part of a tradition that dates back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Eino chayev skila sheyignov mishal aviv v'yikne basar bezol v'yayin bezol v'yochal v'yishte chutz mirshus aviv. Okay, there are many, many conditions here. It's not enough that he steals the money of his father and he eats the basa that he buys with it and so forth and so on. He's got to eat it in a certain type of chabura. We've got to describe the entire atmosphere, the ambiance of that achila. He eats it out of his father's rishus, and it's got to be in a chabura. Who are the people that make up this chabura? Kulam reikanim upchusim. They're a bunch of lowlives. Not only that, what does he do with the meat? V'yochal basar chai. He doesn't have time to waste by cooking his meat. Right? So the Ganovim, I guess, are always on the run. So it means this is what we call Michael ben Josai. In other words, it's not fully cooked. It's cooked to the point that the human body could tolerate it. Right? We're not talking about sushi. We're talking about basar chai, but it's chai v'eno chai, mevushal v'eno mevushal. So it's partially cooked. I mean, a third, a fifth, whatever it is. Okay, now the Rambam goes into detail about how much meat he has to consume in this chabura of reikanim upchusim. What volume of raw, or shall we say partially raw, partially cooked meat does he have to eat? Mishkal chavishim dinrim. Fine. How much of yayin he has to drink? Chatzi lug. Fine. Now, ganav mishal aviv v'ochal achilu zu b'rshus aviv. If he eats it in the domain of his father, in other words, he's within the reshus of his father, he doesn't go outside. Oh, sheganav mishal acherim, if he stole money from somebody else, and even if he steals that money and he buys meat and wine from that stolen money and he eats it with reikanim and pchusim, he's potter. So again, this is a potter, that's halacha mipia Kabbalah, one of those various nuances and conditions which the Rambam opened up by saying, Achila zu shechayv ledvarim harba yesh b'hem. There are many conditions. V'chein, im ganav mishal aviv, so he steals money from his father, v'achal achila b'chu eres zu, this disgusting achila where he's stuffing himself with volumes and volumes of meat and wine, and b'rshus acherim, and he's in this group of reikanim and pchusim outside of his father's domain. But v'haisa achilas mitzvah. Again, I don't know exactly, how to evaluate the reality here. Of achilas mitzvah. Afilu b'divrei, even if the mitzvah is only d'Rabbanan, like for example, a sudas mitzvah is not a doraisa, or a sudas ibur achodesh is not a mitzvah doraisa. Could be that on Yontif, achila is an achila doraisa, mitzvah doraisa. So if he would take this stolen meat, sit there outside of his father's rishus with all these pchusim and reikanim, and eat volumes and volumes, devour, consume meat and yayin, in a way that the Rambam describes it as mechu eres, it's repulsive. But it's on Yontif, he'll be potter. And so too on a Sudas mitzvah or let's say a Sudas Rosh Chodesh, maybe might be a Sudas mitzvah, I don't know. Chanukah, Purim, whatever it might be, it's all D'Rabbanan. And that's where he's pressing away. He's pot. So now the Rambam is going to go into detail about Achila Shel Mitzvah, which is Achila Poteres. Ochal Achila Zu Mechu Eres. The Rambam can't stop himself from calling it Achila Mechu Eres. What he's really trying to indicate is that he ate this massive amount of half-cooked meat and this massive amount of wine that was meshubach and so on. That's called achila mechueres. It's also mechueres because he's eating it in a chabura outside his father's rishus of reikanim and pochsim. B'dvar mitzvah. Okay, dvar mitzvah. Oh, sha'achlo maser sheni b'Yushalayim. So the Rambam has Masechet b'Yushalayim. So I'm trying to figure out, is the Rambam the same as Rashi? Right? Rashi says that this is a mitzvah, to eat the meat and drink the wine that was purchased with most Masechet and now he's eating it in Yerushalayim, that's called a mitzvah. And Rashi even quotes a pasuk. The Rambam has sha'ochel imoy b'dvar mitzvah o sha'ochlu maser sheni b'Yerushalayim. Does that sound strange to you? Is that Rashi? I don't think that's Rashi, because the Rambam is talking about eating maser sheni b'Yerushalayim. The Rambam is talking about not most maser sheni, but maser sheni b'Yerushalayim. I mean, the Rambam is certainly not talking about some sort of an invitation that we saw in the name of the Tal Torah, that really this meat is not Maaseh Sheni. It doesn't have Kedushas Maaseh Sheni, but he's imitating what the real rightful Bailim. The Rambam is talking about Achal Maaseh Sheni. So the Rambam is basically saying that he stole Maaseh Sheni. Let's say, for example, his father took most of Maaseh Sheni, went to Yerushalayim, purchased meat in Yerushalayim. That meat now has the status of Maaseh Sheni. And now the Ben Soramora steals that meat and he eats it in Yerushalayim. Again, the Rambam's language is Ochal Maser Sheni b'Yerushalayim. Again, the Maser Sheni has to be meat and wine, because otherwise there's nothing to talk about. The Rambam doesn't have to exempt him under the category of mitzvah. So where's the mitzvah over here? The mitzvah is Achilas Maser Sheni b'Yerushalayim. So I just want to read to you, and this will be, food for thought. Maybe we'll pick this up next week because I want to finish up. He says the following. I'll read it to you inside. Just a second. Koshek Tzas. This is the Lechem Mishnah. To be Divrei Rabbeinu Mashma, the Taima, to Hadamai Sushenu, who Bishum Dahavi Dvar Mitzvah. Right? The Rambam is giving examples of an Achila of a Dvar Mitzvah. Shekain Kosav Ketzad. What is the case of Dvar Mitzvah? The Rambam adds, he ate Ma'aseh Sheni b'Yerushalayim. The Bechad Gavnahu. U'Gemara lo mashma came. The Amr Sham came in the Chi Arche Achele lo Mimshach. The Gemara doesn't say that the reason why he's potter in Ma'aseh Sheni is because it's a Dvar Mitzvah and he's eating an Achila Shal Mitzvah like the other cases in the Mishnah. But the Gemara says Mishum di Urche v'lo Mimshach. Upirish Rashi Zal Kederech Mitzvaso Shenemar Bebakar Bitzon B'Yayin U'B'Shecher Klomar Techenu Derech Mitzvaso Likach Me Osan Amos Basa V'Yayin Became in the Darko Kain Lo Mimsha Eina Tam Mishum Dahavi Dvar Mitzvah the Eina Mitzvah Liochlo the Ben Soramor is not obligating the Mitzvah V'Achila Ela Bailim, Kmosh Kosav Rabbeinu Behilchas Ma'aseh Sheni, Nechal Baila. V'zui mitzvah k'niksiv yachalta. In other words, you take your Ma'aseh Sheni to Yerushalayim and you eat it there, but that's not the obligation of the Ben Soramor. So the Rama obviously is not talking about a Dvar mitzvah. Misha Eino Bailim. I can't read the next word here. Oh, Ein Bo, it's a little bit erased here. Ein Bo HaMitzvah. V'nirami Rabbeinu d'nosan atam mipnei shehu mitzvah. So how can the Rambam talk about a mitzvah? And this is one of his examples of Dvar mitzvah, when there's no mitzvah incumbent upon the ben to eat the ben to eat the Ma'aser Sheni. So I thought the answer to the Lechem Mishnah would be what we saw in the name of the Tiferes Yisrael, the way we interpret it, that there's also a din in the Chefza of the Ma'aser Sheni that it should be eaten. So he doesn't have a Chovos Gavra. That Chovos Gavra is Mutelis ala Bailim. But on the other hand, there is a mitzvah klapi, the Ma'aser Sheni, that it should be eaten. But again, how do you fit that into the Gemara? The Gemara says the chi urche lo mimshech, which indicates it's not because there's a mitzvah here. So again, let's just end with the following summary. We, on the one hand, we can understand the Rambam per se, and the Rambam is correct that the Achila here is an Achila shel mitzvah, and that's what exempts the Ben Sorer, because there's a mitzvah, the Kedushas HaChefza of Ma'aser Sheni, that it should be eaten, even though he's not the Bailim and he doesn't have a Chovos Gavra. But what we don't understand is how to reconcile that with the Lashon of the Shas, that ki urche is therefore lo mimshach. But again, Rashi himself on ki urche, Rashi says kiderech mitzvasa. So somehow ki urche, even in Rashi, so that's, you can't blame the Rambam for this. Ki urche means kiderech mitzvasa, and it comes back down to an achila shel mitzvah. Again, you could fit into Rashi that he's imitating a Dvar mitzvah, but you don't have to say that. Maybe Rashi holds that there's a mitzvah even for the Ben Sorer Mora who's not the Bailim to eat this basar because of the Chefza Shel Ma'aser Sheni. It has Kedushas Ma'aser Sheni. And that's called Urche. And that's clear from Rashi that Urche means Kederech Mitzvasa. Doesn't Rashi say that? Where is it? Ki urche kederech mitzvasa. But again, let's just point out that even though we don't understand the psychology so well, why should the Torah say that since he's eating kederech mitzvah, so therefore eino nimshach? Maybe it's a metaphysical, Kabbalistic concept that somehow an achila sheish bar mitzvah doesn't have that same impact on the soul to be mamshich, to be moshech him to go wild, But it seems like that's the halacha, that achila shel mitzvah is excluded from Ben Sorer Mora because lo mimshach. The Gemara says lo mimshach. So the Ma'aser Sheni now becomes one example of a derech mitzvah from which we can determine and learn that the reason why the Ben Sorer Mora is potter for this achila shel mitzvah is because lo mimshach. Okay then? So that's where we'll stop. So let me take this opportunity to wish you a great Shabbos. Thank you so much.